And it wasn't too much introspection that we had to do to realize that yaar aur paisa kama ke kya karenge, right? Like we both weren't on that hedonistic treadmill ki abhi ek aur badi gaadi ya ek aur ghar, abhi villa, abhi kutta, abhi kutte ke liye ghar. And I had made up my mind that I wanted to be in a space. I didn't think about social sector, not profit, for profit. I knew that I wanted to be at problems because at my core, I love to solve problems. But I wanted to solve problems which were meaningful and not necessarily making people eat more noodles or biscuits or atta or any of that. People traditionally look at, are NGO matlab, jhola leke nikal gaye and doing work without motive of profit. And I felt like the approach that Atul had was very, very different. It was very, very focused on scale, solving problems at scale, but without necessarily profit being the motive.
Performance marketing, e-commerce marketing, content marketing. Is this the world that you see yourself in? If you dream to work in these roles at Hindustan Unilever Limited, here's your chance. Apply to AltUni's certificate program in digital marketing with HUL. The participants achieved a return of 12 times the investment with an 80% average salary hike. Hurry up! Apply now to the program from the link in the description. Limited seats available.
Given my background, my academic background and the years of experience that I had, I was obviously gung-ho about FMCG and I want to crack FMCG, but I ended up getting no calls and Setmax was the only one ki like jo bhi bacche hain sabko bula lo, and that was the one I was able to crack. So it wasn't by choice. It was the only option that I had.
So coming to ITC now, legendary organization. अभी तो खैर बहुत सारे memes बनते हैं उसके stock price के ऊपर, but definitely, I mean, anybody that I know who's ever worked at ITC always says that they learnt a lot in that organization. So tell us about that time. I think you started off actually in South India, right? So although you were from, so was it that because you were from Mumbai, you were sent to South India to experience that market?
Yeah, I think ITC's philosophy is that if you're from one region, they just send you to an opposite region. But when it comes to TN and Kerala, they try to send people who at least know the language because learning gets completely diluted. And looking at my name, they must have figured out that I would be fluent in Tamil, which I wasn't. But yeah, that was my experience. I was sent to rural Tamil Nadu and then rural Andhra as well. So that was 3 years of sales in...
So did you become impatient during those days? कि यार कब brand manager बनने के लिए आया था, sales ही करवा रहे इतने time तक?
No, quite the opposite. I feel like those 3 years were the most important and the most life-changing years of my life. Although I was looking forward to brand management and all of that, the lives that shaped me as a person was those sales years, because what that stint does is puts you in the middle of a team, a large team, right? I was 24, 25, and I was leading a team of 70 people. And these are people who have spent 10, 12 years on the field doing the work, and then suddenly this person comes in who's just fresh out of college, and then that person is supposed to lead you. So it's a very, very challenging role. So I felt like I learned a lot about myself, learned a lot about leadership as part of that stint. There are some who take this for granted that there will be somebody from college who will come and lead us. And a lot of the sales roles are sometimes hierarchical. So there are people who will say that, okay, the first day you come in, they'll be like, sir, bataiye kya karna hai. So these are like one set of people.
Sarcastically saying, sir, bataiye kya karna hai. You mean to say, okay.
Yeah, so that's one set of people. The other set would be those who are extremely defensive. They will come and oppose everything that you say. But the thing is, with logic, you are able to convince them and you are able to show what value you are able to add. And then there is this third segment, which is a very, very interesting segment. And luckily, I had a couple of such people in my team. There was this young chap called Senthil, who was equally brilliant, equally sharp. And I realized that there is nothing that separates me and him, right? It is just that I've had the privilege to go to a B school and I have had that thappa of an IIM on me, but fundamentally he's smarter than me. He has spent more years on the field, and to lead this segment I felt is the most challenging one. It really pulls out what you are made of. So I had to like really work hard with this person. So I sort of accepted it right away, and I confessed to him that also, that look, you're way smarter than me. Let's work together. Let's treat this as a problem. And over the period of 2 years, I think I was able to win him over through some bits of compassion, some bits of dedication. And you realize what your strengths are when you are put in these situations. So I think that's what the FMCG role is all about. I don't know whether it is glamorous now or it isn't, but anybody looking to do an MBA or looking to get into marketing as a space, I feel like the sales stint really grounds you as a person. It gives you the learning and the understanding of how purchases happen, what users do, how trade reacts, and also most importantly, it teaches you team management.
So how did you finally decide to become, or how did you manage to bag the opportunity to work for foods division? Because obviously ITC has cigarettes, it has paper and packaging, and there are various products even there, and there is personal care. So how did foods happen, and how did Yippee noodles happen? Did you like gun for it?
So my sales experience was also in foods. Okay. So that helped. So people who typically work in a specific business unit, so if you worked in sales of a specific business unit, then, and if you do well, you're likely to go into the brand role for that unit. So it was more like a natural transition. And Yippee was just pure chance. Like we were 8-10 of us going into the brand roles, and I don't know whether it was lottery or it was just pure chance.
So tell us about some highs now that you became. First you became, I think, an assistant brand manager, then you became a brand manager, leading, at that time it was how many 1,000 crores?
It was 1,000 crores.
1,000 crores, right? So I mean 1,000 crores for somebody who's still probably not even 30 or just about 30, leading a brand of that sort. So what were the highs and lows of that time?
So when I went in, this was the precise challenge, right? It is the category which is known by the competitor. And it was such a, like, while the numbers and all are there, we grew to 1,000 crore brand and all of that. I think some of the interesting challenges that we had was, again, how do you pick a user segment to go after, right? You know that there's no way a Maggi loyalist will move out of Maggi. There's just so much nostalgia. There's so much attachment to that product. It is more than the product. It is emotions. So you have to find a niche, right? And I feel like a lot of young entrepreneurs, we met a few just before the talk as well, and I sensed the entrepreneurial energy, segmenting markets and all of that. And at that time we used to do similar things, right? Like to understand who could be users, who could be adopters. So there were a couple of insights. I won't take credit for it, but the insights were strong. One was that if you go to tier 3, tier 4, or even rural India, a lot of cooking happens, the noodles is actually a meals, and the cooking happens in small round utensils. And by design, Maggi, you will have to break it and then cook it. And then the insight was that kids really love to slurp long noodles. So why don't you make a block that is round, right? So we went sharp after the rural segment, that is one. Second is young kids who are now going to start consuming noodles. So you target young mothers and look at that as a segment and make your own niche. So that's how we approach the problem. And for everything there was an insight, right? Like what do young kids like to do, and how do you make the slurping experience better? What were the pain points with Maggi? The fact that it lumps out after some time is the biggest pain point that kids felt. So we solved for all of these, and we went after the right target segment. And we were the first ones, like in the history, Maggi's been around from the 70s. We went up to a 22-23% market share. While all of these numbers are there, the way I
But
internalize.
that's phenomenal. 20 to 23% by going after the monopolistic guy, challenging them from scratch. And it's not like there weren't other people who had tried. There were other players as well.
The only one prior to this was Top Ramen, who had gotten to a 6-7% share and then again went to 1 or 2% share. I don't know how the market is now, but when I was leaving, it was this way. So it was Maggi at 65, we were at 22, and then everybody else was sub 2. So while the numbers were a big win for me, experientially how I internalized the wins were when I first started doing research with consumers. I was a purist, evergreen. But so went to users and said that which brand of instant noodles do you like to have? The users were like, instant noodles क्या होता है? Like, अच्छा आप मैगी बोल रहे हो? हाँ ये हम तो मैगी खाते हैं. And then from that sense we had to actually position ये वाली मैगी अच्छी लगी कि ये वाली मैगी अच्छी लगी. So that's the exact way in which we had to do our research. And then a year, 2 years down the line, there was some improvement, and we were only going to our target segments, right? And we did see brand recall being high from the sense that 2 years down the line when I went to do research, it was like, ye wali Maggi ya ye lal Maggi? Because we were red in color, so like we graduated to become lal Maggi. Then 1 year hence, we were actually known by our brand, although mispronounced, we were called Yippee noodles. The big win was identifying the segment and making sure that the product solves for the need for that segment. Till date, my friends don't know how successful Yippee has been, because all my friends, like the room here, won't know about Yippee noodles. But I made peace with that. I think it was a great time and a great journey for me.
Lakshmanan, you're clearly doing well, right, at ITC, and people like Dhoni were going to come and become brand ambassador of Yippee noodles. So why did you leave all of that, yeah? And why did you, get out of that? And I think you didn't just leave with the intention of joining another company, or I think you just went like on a holiday to South Africa for 2 months or something like that, and just completely changed career trajectory, right? So what was the trigger and what suddenly happened?
So I wouldn't say it's a trigger or it's like this one aha moment. I think while we've talked about the professional journey, there is the personal journey in parallel, right? It's been 7-8 years of being at that pay package which I had never dreamt of. I had bought that 3 BHK.
Yeah, you bought the 3 BHK, by the way. So that's the other thing. I mean, एक चीज, someone was asking me just before this, कि और कुछ होना हो, India gives you the chance to make your dreams come true. And if nothing, at least that you should definitely bet on. Anyway, let's come back to your...
So financially, I think that was a huge journey for me, 7-8 years of that income, and not just buying the flat, right? Like paying off the loan, paying off my education loan, completely being debt free was one huge change that happened, and I began a journey inwards. I also got married, and Pragya also shares similar wavelengths with me, and we started having a lot of these deeper conversations about life, about what brings us happiness. And it wasn't too much introspection that we had to do to realize that yaar aur paisa kama ke kya karenge, right? Like we both weren't on that hedonistic treadmill ki abhi ek aur badi gaadi ya ek aur ghar, abhi villa, abhi kutte ke liye ghar, and so both of us, fortunately, we weren't in that treadmill of sorts, and we used to have these conversations. So there was this huge financial privilege, I would like to call it, to be completely debt free, to have like what you had dreamt of achieved, and having that, no matter how much how much we would like to let go of that, having that pedigree somewhere helps, right? If I would struggle to believe that if somebody is from an IIM and still struggles for any of the basic needs in the Maslow's hierarchy, or even for that matter self-esteem, would be a surprise to me. So like what drives you is the question that kept coming back at me. Around similar time, I guess 2017 or 16, my in-laws also moved to Bangalore. While most people don't get along well with in-laws, I think for me it was a life-changing decision taken by them. We used to spend a lot of time with them. My father-in-law is like I would like to see him as a great thinker. He used to quote these Hindi poets and philosophies and ask these really amazing questions by authors, by poets. And there was this one line he said, I don't remember whether it was Harivansh Rai Bachchan or Dushyant Kumar, but this line which he said was, सारा जीवन निकल गया बस जीने की तैयारी में. And then I absorbed that and I was like, okay, सारा जीवन निकल गया बस जीने की तैयारी में. And it made me think like, what am I living for and what drives me the most. And before that break also, I felt like I had already internalized a lot of the privileges that I had. One is the gender privilege. Second is obviously the financial privilege, as I called it. The third was we also used to go to a lot of art exhibition. Kochi Biennale is something that we try and go to every 2 years. And over there was this art installation. It was very experiential, so I can't describe it. But it was about this kitchen, and it talked about how people from different castes are made to eat, and you were made to experience it. And I remember we used to have these debates about reservations and how reservations should be only basis how much you earn and not necessarily based to caste. And all of that understanding came shattering down, and I internalized how deeply caste interplays with your day-to-day life, right? And just that realization. And then I remember you also sharing Annihilation of Caste by Dr. Ambedkar, and reading that, and all of that really changed me. And I felt like I wanted to introspect and do something that gives me joy. And that was what that break was all about. I knew that I wanted to be at problems because at my core, I love to solve problems. But I wanted to solve problems which were meaningful and not necessarily making people eat more noodles or biscuits or atta or any of that. So yeah, so with that in mind, I started looking for opportunities or problem statements which I connected with.
You said you joined GiveIndia after that, and so tell us about that. So by the way, guys, GiveIndia is amongst the top-notch, NGOs in India. Has probably been funded by every tech entrepreneur that you admire is likely to have invested, and given money to GiveIndia to give back to the society. Obviously, when you started off at GiveIndia, it was not so well known the way it is right now. Similar to how your Yippee journey was, funnily. So GiveIndia में आपने क्या काम करना शुरू किया? What was the big kick there?
Yeah, so when I started shortlisting opportunities, I was very clear on the kind of spaces I wanted to work in. And through my learnings, I was very clear that the people I work with is way more important than the problem itself. Yes, the problem is also important, but I wanted to be with people who connect with my own values. And Pragya, my wife, had worked with Atul, who's the founder, and she connected me with him, and I felt like I connected with his vision, the way he looked at the space. People traditionally look at, अरे NGO मतलब झोला लेके निकल गए and doing work without motive of profit. And I felt like the approach that Atul had was very, very different. It was very, very focused on scale, solving problems at scale, but without necessarily profit being the motive. And the setup that he has, it is almost like a startup setup, right? He was with InMobi. He had set up this space where there were a lot of young people. It was startup energy, and everybody was there with the intent of solving meaningful problems, right? And that drove me towards it.
And so you had to take a pay cut as well.
Yeah, a massive one.
And that didn't bother you at all?
That didn't bother me at all because I had made peace with the fact that, the level at which I was already at, even if I were to take a 50% pay cut, which I did, the level which I was at then and even where I am at now, I still feel like it is great.
Can you tell us about the work that you did So I understand how you joined giveIndia, but so what did you do there? And what was the impact that you saw of the work that you did?
At giveIndia, I think the primary problem statement was to develop a subscription giving platform. That's what I was working on. And I was working at the NGO side of things, which is basically working with nonprofits. We worked with 1,000+ nonprofits, making sure that the funds that are delivered to them are being utilized in the right place. We use tech to do a lot of the due diligence. We built a consumer-facing marketplace. It was the first subscription donation platform. So a lot of that was built from scratch from our own team of engineers. So very, very exciting work. Learned a lot about tech and the ecosystem. Got so fascinated by the tech that I felt like, I want to take a break and learn coding myself. And this was just after COVID had hit.
If I have to look at some metric about this subscription platform, so when you built it, like what was the size of donations that you started getting? Because you're saying that you made it easy for people to donate because of the product. So kitna paisa you started collecting because of the tech improvement that you did?
Any subscription product, you look at it from an LTV standpoint, right? So at the time when I had built it, we were obviously we started from zero. At the time when I was leaving, the product had an LTV of about 60 crore, which contributed significantly to giveIndia's overall bottom line. We were a 30 crore organization when we had joined. Right now it's a 1,000+ crore organization.
That you're doing now, because you're doing the nudge, which is also connected to giveIndia, although it's not giveIndia. So what is it that you do here, and what's the vision with this current project of yours?
Yeah, so Atul also runs this entity called as the Nudge Institute, which is basically aiming to alleviate poverty by 2047. And then there are multiple product streams, and there are entrepreneurs who run specific programs which focus on poverty alleviation. And there are different ones. There is one colleague of mine who runs a program which is specifically focused on ultra poor in Jharkhand. And they work 3 years with them and make sure that they come out of ultra poverty. I lead this program called Future Perfect. And the primary hypothesis or the theory of change there is that today there are hordes of graduates from rural India, from semi-urban India, who graduate but they lack the basic employability skills. Right, pretty much like the skill gap that you are solving for a different market. There is a different market who nobody is solving for. There is, on the one hand, demand for the jobs, and because of the demographic dividend of India, which is more like a demographic time bomb now, there are 1 crore+ youth coming into the workforce every year, and they lack basic employability skills. And we did an understanding of entry-level jobs across sectors for these kids. It is primarily behavioral, it is primarily got to do with confidence, collaboration, and a lot of this is hugely intertwined with language. And because English is the mode of official language, so to say.
Official language of employment.
It becomes a huge barrier for youth across the country. And while there are lots of, and if you were to look at the market, there are two extremes, right? On one extreme, there are these apps which are meant to improve your English, but they are very, very self-serve. They are for slightly more savvy users, and which is why there is no adoption amongst our youth. And on the other end of the spectrum, there are very, very high-touch physical training models which focus on learning for the youth. And there is almost nobody who's working on a tech-based solution which is scalable, focused on our segment, so to say. So that's the problem statement that I'm working on, where how can we train our youth who need a lot of vernacular support, who need a lot of hand-holding, who need live training, but at the same time keep the product scalable.
So how many people have you trained over the last few months?
So over the last year, we've trained over 10,000 youth.
Wow.
We're still at a pilot stage. I think Thanks. Yeah, I think we're still at a pilot stage. There is a lot to be worked on the product front. So we are not chasing numbers at least for a year. And that's what the Nudge's philosophy is on, right? It is like a startup, and The philosophy is on making sure that you pilot and prototype a product in such a way that you identify an MVP. Then you go to the propagate stage where you get other adopters to adopt it. So my idea is to build an app which then gets open source, that tomorrow other non-profits, for-profits, solopreneurs want to train people in the spoken language, they will be able to adopt it. So that's the second phase, but that is at least a year or two away in my eyes. And that's the journey that I'm looking at taking over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, I have like hundreds of questions about, the work that you do. But in the interest of time, I need to open up the floor to questions so that they can ask you questions. Otherwise, we'll be doing very poorly on time. So, yeah.
So I am Divyanshu. So I want to know, like you told you are a brand manager at Yippee. So I just want to know how you build a brand at big companies. We know how a startup works, but how you do a startup at a ITC like brand.
If I were to be honest, I think building a brand at a startup is much better. There is much less baggage, much less legacy that you have to work with. But at the same time, there is also the luxury of shared knowledge. There's a luxury of teams who have worked on it in the past. Capital is not a constraint. With all of this, some of the fears go away, right? Like if you were to think of yourself as an entrepreneur working on a problem, if I were to put it very, very simply, hiring, which is a huge challenge, is solved for. Funding, which is a huge challenge, is solved for. And you just focus all your energies and time in just solving for the problem. So I would say it is much easier in some ways.
I'm Puneet Surana from Galata, the podcast. I see a streak of clarity across your entire journey so far that you've shared with us. Can you tell us how you whittle down the ideas or the opportunities that you have? What's your process behind getting clear with things?
It's something that I've been obsessed with right from the start, being clear on what I would like to do. So when I didn't have the financial constraints, I feel like, although in retrospect it does seem clear, but I know that I was driven by the financial motives quite a lot. I would say that for me, a lot of the clarity came from that financial freedom. So which is why I would like to say that I had the financial privilege. I know that there are people who join the nudge even now at a very, very young stage, and they are just so much clearer about the problems that they want to solve for. The thought process that I like to follow is just a simple exercise, and that's something that I do whenever I take a break, be it over the weekends now, or when I took longer breaks, I consciously spend time in writing through my thoughts, making sure that my priorities in life are clear, right? And not just from a professional standpoint. In life is something that you have to always prioritize on as to who you are and what is important to you. And what comes from it, professional goals might just be a small part of it, but if you are clearer about other aspects of life, like for example your own fitness, be it physical, be it mental, the bonds that you build with the people that you know that you have an environment of love, you know that your fundamentals are sorted. And when your fundamentals are sorted, what's the worst that could happen in your professional life? So you are way more ambitious, you're open to taking risks with professional life.
Hi, my name is Jay, and I'm from Bombay. Last week I was reading this report by World Employability Survey, which said that the world has created more graduates in the past 35 years than in the last 800 years. So, and like 60% of the Korean cab drivers are graduates, 31% of the US clerks are graduates. Even in India, with your current stint that you're trying to solve a very meaningful problem, how are you solving the problem of employability? And how are you deciding in terms of what skills a 21-year-old or 22-year-old who's entering into the job market? Because India's problems isn't jobs. India's problems is productivity. So, and what kind of skills are you trying to convey and trying to teach to these 21, 22, 23-year-olds who are entering into the job market?
Thanks. I think it's a great question, and the answer is very nuanced, right? So if I were to boil it down, and the facts that you say, it's just going to get worse, right? Like every year there is, like in the next 10 years, the number of people entering into the workforce is just going to double that figure that you just said. And it just seems like a mountain when you just look at it. So it is important that you break it down into various challenges, which is why even at the nudge, we break it down into various segments. So if you were to look at it, there is the ultra poor who are just they're not even able to see where their next meal is going to come from. The solution for them is going to be extremely different. There is the poor who can, let's say, look at their next meal. At least there is food on the table that is visible, but they have to work. So there is a different solution for them. And there is the low income segment. So each of them will have their own nuance and their own pathway to poverty, freedom from poverty. So that is on the supply side, so to say, loosely put. And each of them will have their own solutions. And on the demand side, on the job side, there is job growth that is happening, in the service-oriented space, which I am focusing on. There is obviously employment creation that will have to be focused on. So there will be teams which will be working on entrepreneurship, how will we drive more entrepreneurship. And at the same time, there is agri-based income, which will have to tie back into some of the segments that I talked about. So if you were to, if I were to answer it from the problem that I am focusing on the supply side, I am looking at low income, which is basically anyone who has family household income of under 20,000, which means, and here there is penetration of smartphones. Here there is some capacity to pay. So you can look at almost like a for-profit sort of a model and make solutions which are sustainable from what the student pays. But the idea is to bring down the cost to such a level that it becomes viable. So that's what I'm working on. And with regards to skills, I think it's an ever-changing pace. The reason why education doesn't work is, even with NEP coming in now, how fast markets will change, and it's just going to get the pace of change is just going to get faster. We will have to keep adapting, and that's, I feel, the responsibility of the skilling ecosystem at large. But this will have to evolve, right? We will have to start looking at other skill sets which are coming into demand slowly but surely. That's the way we are looking at it.
Yeah, I mean, we are in a very different ecosystem, but I also tell the team all the time that if we are running the same courses 18 months later, then we are probably doing something wrong. Okay guys, a big round of applause for Lakshmanan, please.
Performance marketing, e-commerce marketing, content marketing. Is this the world that you see yourself in? If you dream to work in these roles at Hindustan Unilever Limited, here's your chance. Apply to AltUni's certificate program in digital marketing with HUL. The participants achieved a return of 12 times the investment with an 80% average salary hike. Hurry up! Apply now to the program from the link in the description. Limited seats available.